In this video, we're going to be reviewing how to know when there's an emergency and what to do if you find one. Please watch emergency preparedness prior to watching this video so that you're aware of how to respond if you should encounter one of these scenarios. As always, preparation is key. So at the beginning of every shift, you want to make sure that you have your safety equipment ready to go. So I always make sure that I have my manual resuscitator, one at the bedside, and also one at the wheelchair. I'm going to check it at the beginning of every shift to make sure that it holds pressure and I know it's functional. I'm going to make sure that I have spare inner cannulas for my client, the same size as their trach tube right now. So I've got 2 spare inner cannulas here. I will also have one available on the wheelchair. I have all of my suction equipment ready. I've tested it all, and I know that the canister is almost empty, so it should be fine for emergency scenarios. I also want to make sure that I have 2 trach tubes. One is the size 6, that is what my client currently uses, and I also have one size smaller, which is a size number 4, and we'll be going over what that's for in a little while. I always want to have a cell phone with me. If it's a landline, you can clip one of the mobile phones on your belt. You want to make sure you have this with you, that you have 911 easily accessible, and that you also have clients' friends, relatives, doctors pre-programmed into your phone for easy access. So always have this on your body, on your person. You want to have a spare full circuit. So it doesn't have to be the full circuit including the humidifier pot, but it has to be your basic 6-foot circuit with an exhalation valve and a trach tube connector. So this is my emergency spare clean circuit that's ready to go. The bagger is the most important piece of safety equipment that you have available to you. It's extremely important that you get comfortable with this piece of equipment and that you try using it with your client when they are healthy and well. If you use this with your client and you understand how they feel to ventilate when they're normal and healthy, this will be a great troubleshooting tool to help you determine if the issue is with your client or with the equipment and the ventilator. So how will you know if your client is in distress and needs your help? There's one very important thing that you should remember, and that is if your client is usually able to speak with you and then all of a sudden they're no longer able to, it means they don't have air. So no voice means no air. There are ways that the client can get your attention, though, without having air, and those might include things like different noises that you can make with your mouth, like tongue clicking, or something to get your attention that does not require the voice. They may also be able to activate alarms on the ventilator, so if they're able to do that, they can activate alarms that way. And all of our clients also have an external call bell system, so they may be activating that repeatedly. When you look at the client, they might be pale or dusky or sweaty. You may also, if the client is in the wheelchair, they may be trying to run the wheelchair into you, or if you look at them, their eyes might be wide, blinking rapidly. There will be some indication that something is not normal and something is not going well for them. It is extremely important and a very valuable thing to do beforehand is have a discussion with your client and find out what they're going to do to get your attention if they really need your help. It really highlights the fact that we should never delay in responding to an alarm, whether it's an external alarm or a ventilator alarm, and that you never ever want to leave your client until that situation has been resolved. So if my client is actively trying to get my attention and they're not able to vocalize, the first thing I'm going to do is disconnect them from the ventilator circuit and attach my manual resuscitation device or my bagger. I'm then going to start bagging the client, and if they're able to start talking to me, then I know that the problem is with the ventilator circuit or the ventilator itself. So my client is now doing fine. And because my client is ventilated 24 hours a day, I will then put him on his wheelchair circuit so I can troubleshoot the bedside ventilation circuit. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and do that. And disconnect from here. I'm going to turn on the vent and reattach to the wheelchair circuit. And now my client is fine. He's being ventilated by the wheelchair ventilator, and then I can go ahead and troubleshoot the circuit. Circuit-related issues will fall into 2 different types: high pressure or occlusion alarms, or low pressure disconnect alarms. The easiest way to troubleshoot your circuit is to start at one end of the circuit and walk your hands all the way along the circuit until you get to the end, looking for issues and resolving them as you find them. I like to let the ventilator continue to run. It will alarm, but that will allow me to feel for airflow through the tubes. So when the ventilator is running, I'm going to start at this end of the circuit, make sure that that connection is tight, and then I'm going to run my hand along the circuit. And oh, here I find there's air blowing out of the circuit here. So there is a hole in this piece of the circuit. So now that I've determined that there's a leak here, I'm going to change this piece to hopefully resolve that issue. So this is garbage. I'm going to grab a fresh piece and reattach it. I'm then going to take my hands and continue to run them along the circuit down to the next connection. And you'll notice this connection is completely disconnected. So something must have happened where this became disconnected from my water trap. So I'll pick up the water trap and reconnect that connection. While I'm here, I'm going to make sure that the cap and the cup are connected tightly together. I'm going to continue walking my hands down the circuit, and then I notice that there's a lot of water and condensation that has accumulated within the circuit, and this can cause an occlusion or a high pressure alarm. So I'm just going to dump this water back towards my water trap until it's completely emptied into the cup. Okay? So again, continuing along, resolving any issues as you find them. I'm going to walk my hands all the way up to the exhalation valve and up to this connection. This flex tube, because it's squishy, it can also cause an occlusion if it happens to be twisted or bent. So if you find any twisting or bending, you want to make sure that it's nice and clear. Now that I've addressed all of the issues in the circuit and changed pieces and adjusted things as I found them, I can try this back onto my client. If I reattach this onto the client and the situation is resolved, then it's great. If not, then what I will do is take a brand new full circuit out of the package and attach it directly to the ventilator and try that. If it still doesn't work, please call PROP and speak with a registered respiratory therapist, and they will be able to further troubleshoot with you, because the issue may be with the ventilator itself, or it might be with the exhalation valve and the associated wires. So if my client is trying to get my attention and he's not able to vocalize, the first thing I'm going to do is disconnect from the ventilator and attach my bagger. I'll start to ventilate the client, and right away I notice that I can't ventilate the client anywhere near as easily as I usually can when he's healthy and well. The first course of action is to remove the inner cannula and switch it with one of your spare inner cannulas that you have ready at the bedside. So I'm going to pull out this, and sure enough, it's full of secretions. I'm going to put in another spare inner cannula, lock it into place, and start bagging right away. So now that I'm bagging, that feels much better, and my client is able to vocalize a little bit. But if we have an inner cannula that is completely occluded with secretions, chances are my client is going to need a suction. So I'm going to pop him back on the ventilator, and I'm going to get ready for a suction. Okay, so disconnect from there, reconnect him to the ventilator. Because this is somewhat of a more emergent scenario, I'm just going to glove my dominant hand, and I'm going to forget about the hand washing just to get on top of the secretions. So I'm going to glove my dominant hand, and again, my non-dominant hand is going to touch everything except the end of the red rubber catheter. I'm going to attach to my suction machine, verify with the client that it's okay to go ahead, turn on the machine, disconnect from the ventilator, insert the catheter, apply suction, rotate, and remove. Rewrap, reattach to the ventilator. I'm going to check with my client again. He may need another suction, so we may need to repeat these suction attempts until the airway is clear. If your client is not vocalizing and trying to get your attention, and you walk into the room, you may see something like this if the inner cannula was not locked properly into the outer cannula for your client. This will be alarming disconnect on the ventilator. The simple solution for this is, if possible, to pull the inner cannula off, reinsert the cannula, make sure it's locked into place, and either reattach to the ventilator, or you can grab your manual resuscitator and use that. If this resolves the issue and the client is fine, then the situation has been resolved. A worst case scenario is that you would come in and you would find a complete trach tube dislodgement. So the low pressure alarm will be sounding on the ventilator. What I would recommend doing in this situation is taking the trach tube and simply inserting it back into the stoma and reattaching the posy ties. If this has restored ventilation and your client is feeling fine, I would recommend contacting your physician right away to find out if antibiotics are indicated in this situation for your client. If the client has a lot of independent breathing time, you may be able to go and get a brand new sterile tracheostomy tube to insert back into the stoma. Sometimes with a trach tube dislodgement, there is a little bit of swelling that can occur around the stoma, which would mean that the number 6, or his current size, does not actually fit back into the stoma. That is why every client also has a one size smaller tracheostomy tube in that event of that emergency. It may be indicated that you need to use the smaller trach tube in the meantime. If that is the case, I would definitely go into the hospital, have the client monitored until the swelling goes down and the regular size trach tube can be reinserted. This is a conversation you definitely want to have with your client prior to any emergency. You want to know if they want the tracheostomy tube put back in or if they are more comfortable with a sterile trach tube being placed in instead. If you are ever uncomfortable or you need a spare set of hands, if you ever find your client unconscious, definitely call 911 right away. If any of the interventions that you're doing are also not helping your client, they're not improving, call 911. You need assistance. Never leave your client in that situation. If the client has to go to the hospital with paramedics, please go with them. You are the one that knows the most about their medical history, you know about their ventilator, you know their settings, and you know what is normal for them. Please never leave your client. So in summary, always be prepared. Always check your safety equipment well beforehand. Use your bagger. Know what a normal ventilation feels like for your client. Remember that no voice means no air and your client needs you right away. Use the bagger to determine whether it's a client-related issue or a mechanical issue and resolve the issues as best you can. If you're ever uncomfortable and you need help, call 911.